Caroline Streatfield is a painter whose work investigates ideas around memory, history and identity. In her recent series of work, Caroline explores her own familial narratives and her maternal Eastern European heritage. Caroline's mother came to London in 1968 from the former Czechoslovakia during the Russian invasion. She did not return until 1989. During the time she was away, her family did not have any contact with her and did not know her whereabouts. This is Caroline's first solo show and is a way of exploring how her ancestors were hidden from her until she herself visited her mother's homeland in 1991 when she was 21. Heather McAteer was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and graduated with a BA in Fine Art from Belfast School of Art before relocating to complete an MFA at the University of Reading. Her practice employs a multidisciplinary approach and explores social and cultural histories, and in particular issues of representations of identity, difference and dislocation. Her recent work has focused on drawing and is a mediation on youth, memory and mortality, reflecting on her upbringing during the turbulent years of the Northern Ireland conflict. Her work is currently on show at Modern Art Oxford as part of the Responsive Space exhibition and also at the Royal Ulster Academy 139th Annual Exhibition at the Ulster Museum, Belfast, where her work was awarded the Drawing Prize. She is an associate member of Open Hand Open Space and Jelly, Reading. So, Heather and Caroline, can you tell us a little bit about the origins of Double Take, how it came into being, please?
So, Caroline and I are both members of Open Hand Open Space. Caroline's got a studio here. My studio's at home, so I'm an associate member. And we both had an idea of doing a show together, possibly an open submission show which we would then jointly curate. But then when we went up to make the arrangements for it, we realised that we both had a lot of work that we wanted to show now. So we decided perhaps two solo shows that would be joined together, possibly with a theme, would work really well together.
While we were planning the show, we realised that our work had quite a lot of crossovers. There's a lot of our work, the crossovers were history and memory, so we thought it would be good to have a title that reflected that, so we decided to call it Double Take. And it still have the strength of two solo shows, but we added collaboration of two artists working together and creating each other's work, which we also think is quite a strong ethos for Open Hand Studios, for artists in general, because a lot of people have an idea that artists just work independently and they can't work in teams, but we dispute that, and lots of artists do, and it's just really great to work with other people and work as a team, and it just gives you an extra slant as well on the work, plus it gives a fresh pair of eyes looking at the work.
So, Heather, your exhibition is called Touching from a Distance. Could you tell us a little bit about what people will find in your show, please?
Okay, the exhibition will feature works from the past year, and a lot of it was made during lockdown. It'll also feature a lot of the work that I made for an artist residency called At Home, which was through the Jelly here in Reading and was funded by the Arts Council.
What media will be working in for this exhibition? What should people expect?
The work is all drawing. I do consider myself a multi-disciplinary artist, but recently I've been focusing on drawing, and it's mostly graphite, but using different surfaces, which I've been investigating recently.
So, if anybody's watching this and they haven't been to Open Hand Open Space before, can you say a little bit about what visitors should expect from the exhibition and especially from your work in Touching from a Distance?
I think probably I would explain that by saying what people shouldn't expect, which would be an exhibition in a neutral white cube space. The gallery space is an historic Grade 2 listed former military cape, which very much carries its own history. and it always has an effect on the work that's shown here, which I find very exciting. In terms of the work I'm showing, I'm very interested in seeing how Caroline selects and interprets the work, and how it responds to the gallery space.
Can you say a little bit about the artwork that's hanging next to you, please?
So this is one of several self-portraits I've been making recently. I started making them kind of sporadically during the lockdown period, making them between other kinds of artworks. And a lot of them are based on a series of photographs that were taken of me around 1993, which is a period before I realised that I wasn't going to be moving back to Belfast. So they speak very much of memory, and they reflect on that time.
So Heather, tell me about this second artwork next to you, please.
I recently completed an artist residency, and the title of my project was called Touching from a Distance, which is the name of my solo exhibition here. And the theme I was pursuing was communication with my parents during the lockdown period. So a lot of the work was talking about their isolation and my communication with them.
I found it very moving to hear you talk about your mother and the packaging materials and that sort of linking over a distance and feeling connected. Can you say, are there any other sort of materials that you're using in that way, as well as the packing materials that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so I made works on tissue paper, like this one. I also did some on brown paper. And again, you get that lovely kind of crinkled effect to work on top of, which makes the work, it just gives it another layer of meaning and interest. And I also then started using envelopes, so if she'd sent me something in an envelope, I'd keep the envelope and then I'd work on top of it. And they were done in graphite, like these ones. And those ones, I used a lot of text in. So there's a piece, it's called The Distant Shore, and it's got a scene very much like this one, but it's got the words across the water. And across the water obviously speaks of distance, but it's also a very Northern Ireland term as well, because people in Northern Ireland call the mainland across the water. So if someone moves over here, they'll say, oh, she's going to live across the water. So it's a very colloquial expression. So it's kind of got a double meaning in there.
Another thought, if anybody comes to this exhibition and they wonder why you use a drawing medium and you don't use painting to express this, and you use monochrome, you don't use any sort of colour, can you, which I think is perfectly valid and I fully support why you're doing it, I understand it, but what would you say to somebody who would like to know your reasons? In terms of not using colour, I just like the aesthetic of black and white. For me, it's incredibly powerful, and I would definitely say there's a very dark element to my work, and I think using that monochrome palette communicates that very well for me. And I like a minimal, sparse image. So that aesthetic links very well for me. And there's also something a little bit cinematic, I suppose. I think some of my works have got a stage set element to them. And I can't think of any work I made recently that I've put any colour in. I think I've occasionally used a red, but it just seems to link with the subject matter very easily. What colour would bring to your work, and I don't think it would add anything. I think it would subtract from it. I think it may diminish the message, the graphic message that you want to
Yeah.
get across.
I did do a few pieces with yellow in, with varying effect. They were okay, but yeah, I'm just continually drawn to black and white. And when I made films a long time ago, they were all black and white as well. So it's a continuing aesthetic that I'm drawn to. And in terms of drawing, I just like the intensity, I suppose, of the experience, and being able to get real fine detail, which I feel, you know, again for the subject matter, just really works for me.
Great. Can you say something about in some of your works I see quite a bit of utilisation of trees, sort of landscape, and juxtaposition with self-portraits and so on. So can you say a little bit about that relationship between trees and heads?
Okay. The trees are a very personal reference for me. I mean, I think a lot of time in artworks, people see trees and they think of something very beautiful, and they are. But in my artworks, it's a very dark personal reference, and it's a very specific event in my childhood, and it was a view from my bedroom window onto some trees, and I continually refer to that. I don't want to specify exactly what that was, and recently the self-portraits have reflected the very, very personal nature of my work, which as I go along getting more and more personal, because I feel I'm getting drawn further and further into describing and depicting in my work that event. So a lot of the time it's me exploring that, not saying exactly what it is, but it's more about communicating a feeling and a state of mind, rather than saying exactly what that is. So it's those two elements coming together.
That's great, thank you.
Okay.
So Heather, finally, can you say how people, if they're interested to find out more about your work, what your website is, your Instagram, any other media platforms you'd like to direct them to, please?
Yeah, I've got a website if people want to look at my work. It's www.heathermcatee.co.uk. I'm also on Instagram under Heather McAteer Art. And I've also recently done a podcast with Jelly Redding. It's called the Jelly Sound and Vision Podcast, and it's on all the usual outlets. And I also did a Meet the Artist Zoom chat with them, which is on YouTube.
Fantastic. I'll look forward to looking into those myself. Super. Thank you, Heather. So, Caroline, can you tell us a little bit about Hidden Ancestors, your exhibition, please?
Yes, it's an accumulation of work from the past year and a half, and as I built up quite a series of work, I thought it'd be good to show it in one place as a solo exhibition. The idea came about because it's about my identity and growing up with a mother from Czechoslovakia, and my story's a bit more unique because it wasn't like she could go back home when I was a child and visit relatives, so it was like a cut-off point, and there was no internet then either, so it was almost like a mystery to me. There was no photographs of her family that she brought over. All I had to go on were her stories. So my work's really about an investigation into a past that I can't really see or touch, I can only imagine. And it wasn't until I was 19 till I visited her country for the first time that I could fill in the gaps in my head and match up the imaginings with the reality, if you like.
Can you say a little bit about the painting next to you and how that relates to what you've just said, please?
Yeah, this painting is loosely based on myself as a child. It's like a self-portrait but retrospective, and I'm sort of embodying the feeling of being a second-generation immigrant. So I'm in the national costume or the folk costume of a region of Slovakia, and even the costume's got an interesting story behind it because I couldn't actually find a costume to model on until I looked on eBay, and I got one off eBay. When I did go to Czechoslovakia and speak to my cousins about the costumes, they couldn't get hold of costumes either. So that's almost, even from their point of view, it's a disconnection with the past. And I thought it was unique to me, but it's also unique to the people that live there. They're also disconnected from their past, which I thought was really interesting, which I discovered during the research. So going back to the painting, this is sort of really retrospectively me as a child imagining what it would be like to walk in that country, or to just feel, to try and imagine and to feel what it would be like to be Slovak, because obviously my memories and my imaginings aren't based in any reality at all.
Is it a typical work in the show, or is it an outlier? This
is a new work. It does reflect the theme of the costume, which is being used as an archetype or a motif, and it sort of stands for that feeling of nostalgia. Okay, so the work is more reflective. It's really to do with how I felt as a child, but also it's a very common feeling because most people have links to someone from a different country. If they go way back in their DNA, we're all connected to each other from different countries, and it's something that everyone can relate to. It's a universal feeling, I think, the history of migration.
So the use of national costume in the exhibition and in your work generally, you use that sometimes in a subversive way, do you, to talk about fake identity, fake nostalgia for belonging? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, I think it is, and also it's hidden because you can walk around with this British identity, but you might have a past that you don't know of or you're not aware of, or it's a historical sort of ancestral past, which is there through dress with costumes.
So in that context, what would you say to people coming to Open Hand, Open Space, whether they've been here before or it's their first time? What do you hope that they will discover from your exhibition?
Well, I hope they get the feeling of disconnection, but also of memory and just trying to understand a different viewpoint on growing up in this country, but also to sort of engage with another country that a lot of people haven't heard of. Yeah, I think the reason why I've used this subject as well is because I didn't visit Slovakia till 1991, which is 2 years after 1989, when Slovakia got their independence, which was known as the Velvet Revolution, and communism started to fall in the whole Eastern Bloc. It was a huge time of upheaval. I wanted to document that as a child growing up in this country, and it was almost like the final piece of a puzzle. So when I went there, everything started to fit into place, meeting my relatives for the first time. And it's really difficult now, living in these times, to imagine what that would have felt like, because we're so used to the internet and looking at photographs online. But if you can imagine, my mother came here in 1968 with a bag with no photographs of her family. She left her brother when he was 13, so when she saw him again, he would have been 33. That's a huge jump. So I really wanted to capture that feeling. I mean, I can't comprehend it really, because nowadays if you left a country, you would be able to get back in contact with them.
Yeah, and there's a double take of the exhibition of both you and Heather excavating the past.
Yeah.
Towards the histories of your mother.
Yeah.
Your connections to your mother and what she means to you, but nevertheless producing art that reaches out for other people too.
Yeah, and I think the title of my exhibition, Hidden Mother, perfectly reflects that. So it's really her hidden life that I knew nothing about, and that's why this recent work reflects that as well. So it was a hidden life that I knew nothing of.
Right. And can you say a little bit about where you'll be taking the work next in terms of themes? Are you still developing investigating these, or do you have a new theme that you wish to develop here?
I'm going to develop a little bit more of the hidden element of it, because before it was very much the archetype of the costume, and now I'm going to sort of the psychological part of it of hidden, and maybe look at some other countries and other people that grew up with the same experience of growing up hidden, because I thought it was quite an interesting angle, because it's psychologically quite hard to explain, but I think you can maybe paint it through feelings or kind of different slants, maybe.
Great. So Caroline, can you say a little bit about the painting you've now put up next to you, please?
Yeah, this painting is called Hidden Mother, and it's really about how when I was growing up, my mother was hidden in this country from her own family. So I didn't really find this out until 1991 when I went to Slovakia for the first time. But my brother knew nothing about my mother's whereabouts. He knew that she was in the UK, but he didn't know she had gone on to get married and have children. And she didn't know that he had gone on to get married and have children either. The police did go to find him and question him, and they asked him if he had a brother abroad, and he said no, because it was a sister. But he didn't elaborate, but the police were suspicious, and I think they weren't allowed to go and play in a different village because he was in a band. So in a way, that's why he couldn't even tell his own wife or his own children that he had a sister. She was totally hidden. And we didn't find this out until, 1991. So when I met my cousin for the first time, I always thought from my Western point of view that she knew about us, but she didn't either. So it's not just about the West's viewpoint of the East. They also suffered as well, and they had losses as well. And I think this painting is really about how my mum was hidden, but she also hid from them, and they hid from her. Hidden mother. And the interesting thing is when I was doing this painting, psychologically, I was thinking about this subject a lot. And as I was painting, all I could think about was being a child sitting on her knee and playing with her hands. Like as a child, you play with your mother's hands. And it was so ingrained in my head, that feeling, that it carried through into the painting, I think. And afterwards, I was exhausted for about 3 hours. But it was almost like an exorcism of that kind of memory of being a child, knowing that she was from Slovakia. And, and I think it's quite a common theme. When you're a kid, you play with your mother's hands. You're fascinated by them, aren't you? Because they're old hands. And I think that's the universal thing about this painting.
No, it's very moving.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.